Every road holds a story. What you're about to hear really happened.
I hadn't planned to stop there. It was supposed to be just a long day on the road. A few more hours until the next bus, and then a bed in a town with a name I could actually pronounce. But the rain started before sunset, slow at first, then heavy enough to blur the world into one long smear of gray. My phone had no signal, the bus that was supposed to come never did. And I found myself standing at a crossroad where both signs were written in a language I couldn't read. There was nothing else to do. So I started walking. The road led down into a valley where a small cluster of houses sat. Wooden roofs slick with rain, thin smoke rising from a few chimneys. A dog barked once, then again. It wasn't the kind of place that expected visitors. No lights, no guest houses, no shops, just homes, and the smell of damp earth. I must have looked lost because an old man appeared in a doorway, his face lit by the glow of a single oil lamp. He waved, said something I didn't understand, then gestured for me to come in. I hesitated for a moment. But the rain had soaked through my jacket, and the idea of warmth won over caution. Inside, the air smelled of firewood and boiled rice. The man's wife smiled at me, small, polite, like she wasn't sure if she should. They spoke to each other in low tones, then she disappeared into the next room. He pointed to a stool by the stove. I sat, feeling the heat crawl back into my hands. He poured me tea, strong, milky, a bit salty, and said one word I understood: sleep. He pointed upstairs. I nodded. The room was small, wooden floor, a single bed, and a window that looked out onto the empty road. There were no lights outside, just the sound of the rain. And somewhere far away, the slow toll of a bell. I changed into dry clothes, sat on the bed, and listened. There's a kind of silence you only find in small places. Not peaceful, exactly, but heavy, as if the walls are listening too. I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I remember is waking up to footsteps. Soft, steady, moving just beyond my door. Then whispering, too low to make out words, but enough to make me hold my breath. It stopped after a while. The rain had quieted too. I turned on my flashlight. Its weak beam cutting through the dark. Nothing, just the wooden floor and my own bag in the corner. I told myself it was the wind. It usually is. Still, I couldn't fall back asleep. When I woke again, the sun was already high. The house was quiet. The smell of firewood had been replaced by something else: bread baking, tea boiling. Downstairs, the old man and his wife were sitting by the table. They smiled when they saw me. He pointed to a chair. Eat, he said. There were boiled potatoes, flat bread, and butter so fresh it still tasted like grass. I thanked them, and for the first time, they seemed to understand. After breakfast, the man pointed to my backpack. Traveler, he asked. I nodded. Yes. Bus. No bus. He laughed softly. Then his wife said something, and his face changed. Not angry, not afraid, just heavy. He looked at me for a long time, then pointed outside. Walk today, he said. Go soon, I smiled, thinking he just meant I should get going before the next storm. But his eyes said something else, like he was telling me to leave before I saw too much. When I stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was pale and clean, and mist hung low over the roofs. Children stood by a fence, watching me with wide eyes. When I waved, they didn't wave back. Further down, a few women were sweeping the ground, moving slowly, deliberately, as if time moved differently there. I noticed something then. Every house had its doors open, but no one was talking, just the sound of brooms, and the faint toll of that same bell from the night before. At the edge of the village, a man was sitting on a low wall, smoking. He was younger than the others, maybe in his 30s, and when he saw me, he nodded. You stayed there? He asked in broken English. He pointed toward the house I'd just left. Yes, I said. They were kind. Let me sleep. He exhaled, looked at the ground, then said quietly, They are good people, too good. I didn't know what he meant. Before I could ask, he stood, dropped his cigarette, and walked away. The road out of the village was a narrow dirt path, lined with tall trees that leaned in like they were eavesdropping. Every few minutes I looked back. The village looked smaller each time. Just roofs and smoke and that one crooked bell tower. but something about it stayed with me. Not fear, just a strange kind of weight. Like I'd stepped into someone else's story for a night, and left before it ended. The road curved along a ridge, opening to a view of the valley below. The rain had washed everything clean, the trees sparkled, and mist drifted like smoke from invisible fires. For a while, it felt good to walk again. There's a kind of calm that comes after surviving a night you didn't plan for. Your body relaxes, but your mind keeps reaching back, trying to understand what it missed. After about an hour, I saw another settlement down the road, a few houses, a roadside tea stand, and a woman hanging laundry that glowed white in the sunlight. I stopped for tea. The woman smiled as she poured it, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "You come from the next village?" she asked, in hesitant English. I nodded. Last night. They were kind, let me stay when the bus didn't come. Her hands froze for a moment. Then she set the cup down carefully and looked at me. "You stayed there, in the house near the old bell?" I nodded again, slowly this time. "Yes, why?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned toward the road, her voice quieter when she spoke again. "They don't take travelers, not for many years." I waited. She sighed, like she was deciding how much to tell. "Before the flood," she said, "many families lived there. Good people, but one year, the rain didn't stop. The bridge broke. Many were lost, their son too. From that house," she paused. "After that, they stopped talking to others. They keep to themselves now, still kind, but..." She didn't finish. The words hung there. Half story, half silence. I didn't know what to say. I just sat, holding the cup between my palms, watching the steam curl upward and vanish. Suddenly, things from the night before started to rearrange themselves in my mind. The soft whispers beyond the door, the bell tolling in the dark. The old man's tired eyes when he said, "Go soon." They hadn't been hiding something from me. They'd been protecting something, their own quiet way of remembering. Maybe I hadn't been a guest, maybe I'd just been a reminder. When I finished my tea, the woman pointed north. "Bus comes from there," she said. "Don't miss it." I thanked her, paid, and walked on. The road stretched between rice fields that shimmered with water. The air was warm, the kind that smells like wet leaves and wood smoke. For the first time, I didn't hurry. Every step felt like a small apology to the place I'd left behind. By the time I reached the junction, the bus was already waiting. Old, dented, painted green, the driver leaned against the door, smoking. "Where you go?" he asked. "Anywhere," I said. He laughed and waved me on board. As we started moving, I looked out the window one last time. The road curved away, the trees swallowing the view of the valley. But I could still hear it. The faint toll of a bell carried on the wind, steady, patient. As if the village was still marking the passing of something I'd never understand. Hours later, the bus stopped at a small roadside cafe. Most passengers got out to stretch. I stayed inside, staring at the rain streaking down the glass. A boy selling snacks walked past the bus window, singing softly to himself in a language I didn't know. It wasn't a sad song. It sounded like a song for remembering. I thought about the couple in that quiet house, the way they'd looked at me, not with fear, but recognition. Maybe they'd once waited for someone who never came home. Maybe they still did. The road turned higher into the hills again, and the sky opened just enough to show a strip of pale blue. I leaned my head against the window, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like a stranger anymore. Some places don't need to tell you their stories. You feel them, like a soft bruise under the skin of the world. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is leave without asking for more. By the time the bus rolled into the next town, dusk had settled again. That soft kind of light that makes everything look older. The streets were busier here, children running between shops. People laughing, bargaining, living. It felt like a different world entirely. I found a small guest house near the main square. The woman at the desk handed me a brass key, smiled like she'd seen 1,000 travelers just like me, and said, "Dinner at 7. I thanked her, but all I wanted was a shower and silence. Inside the room, I unpacked my bag slowly, each item still damp with the memory of that rain. When I reached for my jacket, a folded piece of cloth slipped from the pocket. A small square of fabric, faded blue with a stitched border. I hadn't noticed it before. It smelled faintly of smoke and soap. I turned it over in my hands, wondering if the old woman had placed it there while I slept. It wasn't meant as a souvenir. It was something else. Something left so I wouldn't forget. Downstairs, the guest house had a small desk where travelers could write postcards. I sat there with a cup of tea, pen in hand, not knowing who to write to. In the end, I wrote a note I'd never send. I stayed in your village by accident. You gave me tea and a place to rest. I don't know your story, but I think I understand your silence. I left the note there on the desk. Maybe someone would read it, maybe no one would. But it felt right to leave it behind. That night, I ate dinner outside. The air smelled of rain again, but a lighter kind. The kind that stays in the distance. I watched the lights from the market flicker on one by one. A group of musicians started playing somewhere nearby. Their rhythm slow, repetitive, like footsteps on a long road. For the first time since I'd left the village, I let my shoulders drop. The weight I'd been carrying, not fear, not guilt. Just a strange tenderness, finally loosened. Later, as I lay in bed, I thought about that morning. The old man's soft voice, his wife's quiet eyes. The way they'd said go soon like a blessing. They hadn't been trying to hide anything. They were trying to protect the small piece of peace they had left. And maybe I'd brought something uninvited. Noise, questions, the world. It's strange how people who have lost the most can still be the ones who make room for a stranger at their table. In the morning, before leaving, I went to the edge of the town where the road curved toward the mountains. The mist was rising again, turning the peaks into soft shadows. I took the small blue cloth from my pocket, folded it neatly, and tied it to a low branch by the roadside. The wind caught it immediately, lifting it gently until it fluttered like a flag. Then I turned around and started walking. No photos, no proof. Just the memory of one night, in the wrong village. That somehow felt like the right place to understand people a little better. When I woke, the air smelled faintly of wood smoke and wet grass. The town was already awake, someone sweeping, someone boiling milk, a dog barking at a rooster that refused to stop. Life was happening, ordinary and endless, like it always does after you've spent too long thinking about one small moment. I went out before breakfast. The streets were still damp from the night rain, and the mountains behind the town looked washed clean, their edges sharp against the soft sky. I walked without direction, just letting my feet move the way they wanted. The road led me past a row of small houses, children in uniforms waiting for school, an old man repairing a fence, a woman hanging laundry that caught the wind like white sails. Everything was simple, everything was normal. And somehow, that made it harder to carry what I'd seen, or felt, in the village. At the edge of town there was a narrow bridge over a quiet stream. Below, the water moved slowly, brown and cold from the rain. Someone had left flowers tucked between the railing boards. Wild, half-wilted, their petals trembling with each gust of wind. I leaned over, watching them. Maybe it was a habit there, leaving something behind when words weren't enough. It made me think of that couple again, how they'd opened their home to a stranger, but couldn't open their story. Maybe the two things were connected. Some kindnesses only exist because of what they hide. In my notebook, I found the page where I'd written their names, or at least what I thought I'd heard them say. The handwriting was shaky. Written by firelight the night before I'd left. I tore the page out, folded it twice, and placed it inside the pocket of my backpack where I keep bus tickets and receipts I'll never need again. It felt right to carry it, not as proof, but as a reminder that some stories don't belong to you. They just pass through you, quietly, and stay. Later that day, I caught another bus heading north. It was crowded, filled with people talking over one another. Music from someone's phone, children pressed against the windows. Outside, the road wound through valleys and green hills. Villages appeared and vanished, and every time we passed one, I looked for that same blue smoke, those same wooden roofs, but they never came. It was as if the place had folded back into the earth after I left. By evening, the bus stopped at a roadside inn. Everyone got off for dinner, metal plates, steam, the smell of lentils and garlic. I sat alone at a small table, and for a moment, I thought about what the woman at the tea stand had said. They don't take travelers, not for many years. She hadn't said it with suspicion. She'd said it with pity, and that difference mattered. There's a certain kind of grief that doesn't make noise anymore. It just lives in gestures, a meal offered, a bed made for someone passing through, a small blue cloth folded into a stranger's jacket pocket. When the bus started again, the driver turned the radio up. A song came on, soft, repetitive, the kind that sounds older than memory. I didn't understand the words, but I didn't need to. It felt like the road was humming it too. I leaned against the window, watched the lights fade one by one behind us, and realized something simple. Maybe we never really sleep in the wrong village. Maybe we just arrive in the one that shows us what kind of people we still want to be. The bus rolled north through the night, the hum of the engine steady and soft. Like a heartbeat you could fall asleep to. Outside, the hills turned to shadows, and the sky stretched wider than I'd ever seen it. I thought I'd forget that village eventually. The crooked roofs, the silent children, the sound of the bell carried on the wind. But some places don't stay behind you. They settle somewhere in you and wait for quiet days to return. That night, I finally understood something that had followed me for years. Travel isn't about seeing new things. It's about learning how to see people again. Without judgment, without hurry, without expecting them to explain themselves. When you travel long enough, you meet two kinds of people. The ones who want to tell you their stories. And the ones who give you shelter without saying a word. The couple in that small house belonged to the second kind. They didn't need to tell me about the flood, or the son they'd lost, or why they still left the door open for strangers on rainy nights. Their kindness was their story, and maybe that's what I'd been meant to find. Not an adventure, not a mystery, but a quiet reminder that even grief can choose to be generous. Months later, I took out that small blue cloth again. Its smell had faded, but when I touched it, I could still feel the warmth of that house, the crackle of firewood, the soft murmur of a language I didn't understand, and the weight of silence that didn't need to be broken. I didn't keep it as a token. I kept it as a lesson. Not everything needs to be photographed or told. Some stories are meant to be carried quietly, like prayers. Like the sound of a bell that rings for someone you'll never meet. The more I travel, the less I look for the right place to end up. I take wrong turns, miss buses, walk into towns that don't exist on maps. And somehow, that's where the real things happen. Not in the places you plan for, but in the ones that take you in without asking why. So when people ask me what it's like to travel alone, I tell them this: it's not lonely, not really. It's just full of moments that don't belong to you, but stay with you anyway. Sometimes, when it rains now, I find myself looking out the window and listening for that distant bell. It reminds me that somewhere, in a valley I might never see again, there's a small wooden house where kindness still lives quietly, without needing to be seen, without asking for anything in return, and that's enough. That's what the road was trying to teach me all along.